All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, it's still COVID-19 Watch here. The segments from 11 to 12. We'll take a look at the economics of the pandemics. But before this COVID-19, Moneyline with Nancy comes to you on this channel, 11 to 12. So what else will we be talking about when the whole world is battling COVID-19? Ajuri Ngelale, the SSA on Public Affairs at the Presidency, is joining me. My colleague, will I say is my colleague or my former colleague? Hello.
We're still colleagues, though, Nancy. Good morning to you.
Morning, Ajuri. How are you? Good to see you. Quite a while.
Good to see you too. It has been.
How has it been in terms of getting communication out? Let me start from there, especially at this period, at this time.
Well, I think one of the things we've been really proud of is the participation of our people. There's a hunger in the country for information and for accurate and available information, urgent and quick responding types of information. And I think our people have done a great job in terms of engaging with us, asking really intelligent questions about what's going on and really, holding us to account. But I think one of the major challenges we face on the other side is we all know that there's a misinformation problem globally, fake news across social media and all of that. And it's even beginning to seep into some of our traditional media sources, which is a concern for us. But we understand that the best way to counter misinformation is with legitimate information. And so if you look at for the COVID-19 response, for example, the kind of activity of the NCDC in terms of engaging with the public, making sure that multiple times a day they're coming out to update the accurate data and figures as it relates to confirmed cases, those who have been discharged, those who have tragically passed on, that we get that information to our people as soon as possible so that we equip them to most effectively collaborate with us to stop the spread of the virus.
So let's talk. We've seen, I saw you yesterday at the Minister of Finance and Budget and National Planning when she announced the fiscal stimulus measures. Explain to Nigerians what the mind of, because I say that perhaps you're also speaking for the presidency, what the mind of the presidency is at this time. Though we had President Buhari speech just a few days ago, what is his pulse at this time? For those of you close to him, how is he feeling at this time? Is he taking the welfare of Nigerians into cognizance? Then yesterday's announcement by the Minister of Finance. Right.
The president has not just while he has been president, but as a person, he's always been very much concerned about the welfare of the most vulnerable segments of our population. He's always been a champion for social justice and welfare reforms, particularly what governments at the various levels can do to make people's lives better and of a much higher quality. What he has done in terms of the COVID-19 response very much aligns with that personal concern that he's always had. If you look at across board, if you talk about the availability of relief packages to the most vulnerable segments of the population, particularly in those zones that have been locked down, being Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun State, you know that we have been very, very quick to respond to the particular challenges facing those communities in the satellite towns, etc., around those zones. But he's not just been concerned about those who are adversely impacted around the lockdown zones, he's spread it nationwide. So for example, he has directed the Nigerian Customs Service to release 150 truckloads of ceased rice bags for distribution, not just to the lockdown zones, but nationwide.
Who oversees that distribution? Apparently it's not going to be customs.
No.
Customs handle that.
Right. Well, Customs has a lot of responsibility right now, so it's going to be that the teamwork that has been established between within the aegis of the task force on the response to COVID-19, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, and of course some of the other stakeholders at the state level, making sure that there's a hand-in-glove synergy and making sure that things are distributed in a very, in a way that, really makes sure that there's equity and all of that. So you have that. Then there was a release of 70,000 tons of grains for, the most vulnerable segments of our population as well, making sure that there's food on the table. But in addition to that, I think it's really important to note that the president went ahead to ensure that when we talk about the palliatives, that all of the interventions that we have been making over a period of time. We all know that within the National Social Investment Office, we have a register of about 2.6 million Nigerians in that register. Particularly, we're talking of the most vulnerable now, the poorest households. We are working very hard to make sure that we get advance payments of up to four months. 5,000 naira a month times 4 is 20,000 naira to these families. I want to just be very clear about something, though. There was a huge, kind of bit of misinformation passing around to the effect that federal government has claimed that they have already given 2.6 million households 20,000 naira. We want to reject that right now as categorically false. We never said so. What we did say is that there are 2.6 million households already in our social register, and that we are going to ensure that the funds are, we use that register to make sure that we identify the most vulnerable households around the country. So I just wanted to clarify that.
The question also is, how were those 2.6 million households gotten?
Yeah, so we went through an extensive process. During the time that the social investment programs were being evolved in the Office of the Vice President, one of the major priorities was making sure that we move as many Nigerians, particularly of the most vulnerable segment, into the formal banking system. We wanted to establish BVNs for them, make sure that they can open up bank accounts so that we can, as much as humanly possible, reduce any kind of consultancy and middleman arrangements, making sure that we move funds from the Federation account into registered bank accounts. So that has been a very long process, and because of the technicality of it and the time it takes to register people who, in many cases, are not literate or not educated, you have to really take your time to work with them. But we have done all of that, and that's why this is something that has happened over the last 5 years very systematically and very consistently. So for us, the priority now is about making sure that now that we have identified those households, that we now focus on making sure that they have what they need, while also simultaneously expanding that register even further across the country. So that's really been a predominant focus for us.
Yes, just a few days ago, I saw the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development giving those amounts of monies to the most vulnerable, the poor people, the 20,000 naira, which you've said, 4 months. But I also noticed, which I spoke on my show last week, is that the government has a cashless policy done by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and you also have a financial inclusion strategy. In what that means is to get a lot of people financially included. You will agree with me, Ajuri, that a lot of poor people still do not have accounts. So some of us were indeed worried why cash will be handed out to those people at that time, because we're talking about transparency, we're talking about how can I just see a man counting 20,000 naira like this? Come on.
Well, I think one of the I think underreported aspects of the conditional cash transfer are a few things. One is that even though you're seeing the physical handout of cash, absolutely true, we're not beating around the bush about that. But what you don't see is the technological backbone, right? So for example, we identify a household. We get all the information concerning that household, not just location, but what it is the person is doing or not doing, what the situation of the household is. We have a technological database that we use to identify families. They are in a database. It's on the basis of that, of the data within that database, which is incontrovertible, incorruptible, that we now hand out the cash. So it's a physical emanation of a technological process.
But shouldn't it be taken all through, because you're also encouraging a lot of people to come into the net? And I will tell you that a lot of them do not even have bank accounts. Let me tell you my experience. Last week we did something here on the program. One of our reporters, Ebuka, went to Karu, which is an outskirt of. I just met a woman that was just saying she doesn't have money, she's an Ugu seller, she doesn't even have money to buy Gary, price of Gary has gone up and all of that. And a lot of Nigerians reached out to us. I was even particularly emotional in terms of, okay, let's see what we can do to help the woman. And when we further investigated, Ajuri, I will tell you, the woman did not even have a phone. She did not have an account. For a woman of that caliber that's been doing business at least in a very small scale, and we ensured that was done before we started contributing. So
no, the concern you've expressed is absolutely legitimate, which is why the cash transfer in terms of physical cash, it's very much a temporary interim arrangement. For us, we can't afford to have a situation where we have people suffering. We know where they are, we know what they're going through, and then we are asking them at a time of crisis, when we're responding to COVID-19 and our people need the assistance, we're now telling them, okay, you're going to have to go through this bureaucratic, long kind of formal process before we can help you and your family. For us, we're concerned about in this crisis moment making sure Nigerians have what they need while we're also processing some of the transitional arrangements that will take them into the formal banking system. So it's a legitimate concern and we're addressing it.
Okay. Let's move. Speak to me about what was said by the Minister of Finance yesterday. Some of the, just summarize for Nigerians that couldn't watch, weren't there, definitely.
Well, I think there are some key points here. It's very important for our people to understand that where we are economically today is not where we were even 3 months ago or 6 months ago, nor can that be, can be said of pretty much every other country in the world right now. So the implication of that is we are now having to find very creative ways with a very bare cupboard because of the immediate and drastic cut in oil revenues as a result of volatility in the oil and gas market globally, to create opportunities for our people to not just develop the country, but also to sustain their livelihoods and households during this time. So what we're putting in place is at a time when FARC, I think in January or so, we were distributing about 714 billion naira across tiers. We've now come down to within about 500 billion. Last month it was about 650. We need 650 billion, according to the Minister of Finance, to be able to effectively ensure that state governments can meet up with their current obligations. So because we have forecasted that we are going to be going beneath 400 billion over the course of the next 3 to 6 months or so, the President has put in place some interventions that include a 150 million naira transfer from the Social Investment Authority's Stabilization Fund that would bolster the June 2020 FARC allocation from what may be below 400 billion up to something closer to what states can use to effectively meet their obligations. In addition to that, we are going to put some moratoriums on the debts owed by states to the federal government and to CBN. You know, they took some facilities out from the CBN and from the federal government. We're going to put a moratorium on the repayment of interest and also some of the obligations that they have. We think that that's going to drastically reduce the burden that they're going to be facing during these periods when they have to pay the new national minimum wage and some of the other things that they have involved. We've also put together a 105 billion naira package for injection into the healthcare service delivery system in the country. That is going to enable a few different things. One, we're going to establish research and development and innovation laboratories across public health institutions all around the country. We're going to extend large-scale facilities to Nigerian drug manufacturers to be able to expand existing drug manufacturing plants in the country. Is that
coming from the, because central banks will put up something like that?
Yeah, this is,
okay, it's part of
yes,
it.
this is all part of it. We're also making sure that we're extending facilities to private and public healthcare providers who have shown who have demonstrated a certain standard of operation, so that we can help them extend and expand their intensive care units and some of those things. But it's very critical for us that we address this crisis, and this is the directive and wisdom of the President, that we have to address this crisis in a way that, yes, addresses today's problem, but positions us tomorrow to most effectively address whatever problems may come up tomorrow. And that's why we're providing the new technological backbone, the infrastructural backbone for our very talented medical practitioners who haven't always had the infrastructure to actualize their potentials in the field. So these are some of the measures. And the last thing I would mention is Mr. President at a climate change conference several months ago internationally made the pledge that we will plant 25 million trees in Nigeria. This is very important. It sounds like something that's just a hobby or abstract, but when you understand the effects of desertification in the north and what that has done, not just in terms of the livelihoods of families, but in terms of encouraging terrorism with climate change and some of the other factors, this has a direct tie to our socio-political stability as well as our economic development. So what we're doing is the President has directed that we are going to have 1,000 individuals from the 774 local governments in this country, an equal spread, that are going to be employed under the National Directorate of Employment, under the Ministry of Labor and Employment. They are going to be engaged in multiple sets of programs that include tree planting in conjunction with the President's pledge, that also include rural and urban sanitation, but also include irrigation solutions, installing irrigation systems around the country so that we can most effectively optimize our agricultural productivity and link farmers to markets around the country. So we're going to also be using these young people to offer extension services to farmers and all of that. So it's a very very well envisaged program. These are some of the things that we're going to use in conjunction with the conditional cash transfer and some of the other programs that we're expanding to make sure that we get to the very base of Nigerian society at this time of crisis.
Now, where will that money come from? Because a lot of people are of the view that at this point, recurrent expenditure shouldn't go up. In fact, that the government should cut the cost of governance.
Well, that's the beauty of it.
Yes, one way or the other.
Yeah.
It may not be sacking people,
right.
but there are a lot of things in terms of allowances and all of that. Perhaps your allowance should also be cut.
No, if I had allowance, that's the problem. I don't have an allowance even.
No, but so you understand what I'm saying,
Yes,
Ajuri.
I understand.
Yes, so
I
respond
understand.
to that.
So look, this is where we're at. Your concern is legitimate, right? When we talk about where the money is going to come from, we're not going to bloat the recurrent expenditure profile. I want to make that very clear to our people. We have no intention of doing that. In fact, if anything, we're sizing down. And without sacking people, we're making sure that some of the things in the budget that we wanted to do in terms of salary and pensions and allowances increases that we wanted to make, we now have to just delay it. We're not going to cancel it, but delay it until a time when we recover more effectively. The funds, as you asked, for the NDE program of 770,000 young Nigerians, that is going to come from the 500 billion naira economic stimulus package that is going to be approved by the grace of God by the National Assembly. So those funds are there. I think that program alone is going to take about 60 billion. And so we're very excited about the impact that's going to have. But I also
is it for a time period? Because of course there won't be.
Oh, of course,
What's
yes.
the time frame?
So the time frame is going to run from between, I believe, October to December 2020, towards the end of the year. And it's intentional that we're doing it after the planting season. And this is also very key. The president has been attacking this from all angles. We know about the availability of food and palliatives and conditional cash transfer and all of that's going on around the country. But he's also attacking it from the legislative side. Right now, last week, the president constituted the Economic Sustainability Committee, chaired by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. That committee has several different elements to it in terms of the terms of reference. Not only are they looking at how to most effectively optimize opportunities in terms of direct palliatives to our people, new things that we have not yet done. Some of them will be expansions of existing social investment programs. Some of them will be brand new. But then it's also tasked with providing a long-term economic blueprint for the country that is going to be a kind of sustainability blueprint in the face of the current reality. So how do we double down on the work that this administration has done in terms of diversifying into agriculture, into mining, making sure that our infrastructure is developed in a hurry. Those are some of the things they're looking at. And the reason why all of this is important is because when you look at what the committee is going to be doing, they're also going to be interfacing with the National Assembly, because we know about the 500 billion naira stimulus. But what's also being put into play is how can we create financial incentives for Nigerian micro, small, and medium scale enterprises, and even large industry, to ensure that they do not sack Nigerian workers at a time of crisis. So we're going to try and incentivize the maintenance of the employment of our people across sectors through very critical legislation as well. So there are a lot of things going on.
Yes, and a lot of people, which was also echoed, which I did echo, was it last Friday or so, the president, I campaigned for it on the show in the sense that this is a crisis period. There should be a war room whereby I don't even see why the Federal Executive Council is not meeting. Truly, they may meet remotely, but they should be meeting at this point. But I was happy just days after I said it. I saw the Economic Sustainability Committee created by Mr. President, chaired by the VP. But the other thing is that there's also confusion where the Economic Advisory Council stands. Which is the Bismarck Rewanis, Professor Soludo, and all of that. Can you clarify that if you have information?
I think the president is very clear in terms of making sure that whatever the committees that he establishes are suited to a particular function, and they're very precise in their mandates. And this is part of the administrative prowess there is we have to make sure that whatever we're putting in place, that you're not having a duplication of terms of reference and duties and all of that. So the EAC came into effect at a time when we were looking kind of holistically at the economy under a very ordinary circumstance where things were kind of going even keel and all of that. What you now have is an emerging new reality that required the coordination of several different MDAs. And if you recall, the EAC is a body of individuals who are academics, who are economists, who are kind of outside of the realm of government, right? But now you're dealing with administration officials. You're dealing with the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, the Minister of Works and Housing, the Minister of Finance, Budget, and National Planning, NMPC, GMD, CBN Governor, chaired by the Vice President. So when you have all of these people put together, you're now in a position to, in real terms, with the levers of power, be able to actualize some of the things that you want to put in place. That does not mean that if advice comes from another body, that it would not be absolutely taken seriously and put into effect, perhaps, based on whatever the situation may be. So each body has its function, and I think Mr. President has established each, in his wisdom, based on the wider, programs and policies that are being implemented by the federal government of Nigeria.
Okay, Ajuri, let's just take a few comments in case you want to ask Ajuri a question, because he has less than 2 minutes on this segment before he goes. Mohammed says, based on our assessment, urban poors are yet to receive any palliative so far. The data they were currently working with does not capture the impact of the lockdown as directed by the president. Then Babs, you respond to that. Babs says, Nancy, with the analysis so far given by Ajuri, the SSA to Mr. President of Public Affairs, it's obvious if these palliatives are implemented, then we can, to some extent, heave a sigh of relief. Those issues he raised are quite encouraging. So you want to respond to especially
I want to thank my sister for her contribution. Thank you for watching the program and being a part of the conversation. To my brother's concern, I just want to say that what we're doing in terms of the palliatives, very important for our people to understand this, is we are moving very rapidly, but we cannot sacrifice efficiency for speed. We have to make sure that if we are saying that...
But you can be efficient and also be fast.
Right, exactly. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But we don't want to do one or the other. We want to make sure that whatever we have designed to go out to our people gets to our people. And we want to do it in the fastest possible time. So for us, it's very critical that our people understand that these are running in phases. So for example, just yesterday in Plateau State, across the 17 local governments of the state, you had about 60,000 beneficiaries of the conditional cash transfer, for example. We're running it in Kwara right now. We're running it across the country, but we're running it in phases. I think it was a few days ago that we were in the outskirts of Abuja. We were in Anambra. That was the first day. So it's running in phases, but what is intended to get to our people on the social register will absolutely get to our people, and even those who are not on the social register will certainly benefit from the various relief packages that we put in place. And I haven't even mentioned the 50 billion naira facility, the credit facility that has been extended by the CBN to households, micro, small, and medium scale enterprises around the country, as well as the larger fund of about 1.1 trillion that is going to be liquidity for MSMEs in manufacturing and agriculture and oil and gas, which has been hard hit, all those industries that have been hard hit. So we are very much on top of the situation. And I ask our people to not just take what we say, make sure that you're fact checking us, make sure that you're verifying what we're saying, so that what we're saying is very much in line with what we're doing, because we have absolutely nothing to hide.
Okay. Let's take this last one.
Sure.
Nollycraft says, good morning, Nancy. This grammar is not what the poorest of the poor need at this given time. Your guest should tell Nigerians what FG is doing and will do practically to cushion the effect of this lockdown. Yeah. Hunger is tearing people apart. God bless Nigeria. You want to respond? Yeah, because I think that's what you've been saying.
The truth is...
Or perhaps the person is not really understanding. There's hunger in the land, really.
Yeah.
So,
no, there's no doubt about the fact that there's hunger in the land, which is what necessitates us to do all of the various things that we're doing, even at a time of having halved revenues. Now, I just want to say that there's going to be cynicism. Our people have been failed over and over by various administrations for 40, 50 years. So it's not a surprise that there's going to be cynicism and they're going to be skeptical about what any government person has to say. That is why I say, please verify what it is we're saying in conjunction with what we're doing. And make sure that you don't whatever sources of information you're following are official sources and not the kind of unofficial sources of fake news that we see. We want to encourage the participation of our people because we want them to know that everything that we're saying we're going to do, whether it's getting $7 billion from the various multilateral agencies, we have about $3.4 billion coming in from the IMF, and that's money that we have contributed to them that we're simply extracting. And then you have $2.5 billion from the World Bank and $1 billion from the African Development Bank. All of these things are being put in place to fund, to sponsor the programs that I'm talking about. So if this is propaganda, there's no need for us to be accessing the kind of funding that we require to fund the programs I'm talking about. So all of these things can be verified from the base up to the top of policy implementation, and I'm hoping that our people will learn to trust us after being failed for so many years.
I think what's a nice way to end the program. Or you want to say anything? 30 seconds?
Yes. I would just tell our people that we're in this together, that we will not be able to make the kind of progress on stopping the spread of this virus if we do not work together, government and the people with government. We cannot have the mentality that we're watching government deal with COVID-19. We have to have the mentality that we are walking hand in hand with government to defeat COVID-19 and the effects it's going to have, not just on our public health system, but on the economy. We have to now manifest what everybody always says about us as Nigerians. We're industrious, we're ingenious, we're gifted, we're hardworking. This is now the time. With these opportunities that are going to be made available, this is now the time for us to walk in synergy across political, faith, and ethnic affiliations to say that we're one and we're going to deal with this crisis as one nation.
Okay. This you must answer. Menera Isaac, as if you have the answer. Please help me ask him about N-Power stipends.
Yes, this has been a major question. Thank you for asking that question. First of all, we all recognize that there's a transitional phase from coming from the Office of the Vice President to the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. There are also issues with having to now downwardly adjust the budget and those things that are going to be dealt with and how that's going to be worked out. It's all in the process as we speak right now, and as soon as that process is concluded, which should be very soon, I can assure you that we are going to be out telling Nigerians exactly what is going on and what they should expect moving forward. Okay. We are certainly concerned about it.
Thank you very much, Ajuri.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I've been speaking with Ajuri Ngelale, SSA to the President on Public Affairs. He's been speaking to me at least in the last few minutes about what the federal government is doing in terms of stimulus measures to help, lessen the spread of coronavirus and the effect. Like I said yesterday on the program, is about lives and livelihoods now. So we're tackling it.